halfway through 2023 and it's time to count down the best and worst Hollywood has had to offer so far. What movies will make my best list? What movies will make my worst list? Let's find out.
My baby likes.
Hello, Butter Babies! So we're halfway through this experiment of mine to go see at least one movie a week for an entire year. And I have to say, as far as New Year's resolutions go, this is probably the best one I have ever thought of. I have been enjoying the hell out of the movies this year, and I've seen so many of them. 26 to be exact. And even though more than a few of them have been clunkers, they all have reminded me just how much I really enjoy movies. I'm no Nicole Kidman, but I can say without a doubt the movie-going experience is truly one of a kind, and I'm glad I've been on this year-long ride. Can't wait to see what the second half of 2023 brings. But first, we have some business to take care of. As I said, there have been some really bad movies released this year that should never have seen the light of day. But there have been more than that that were absolute treasures that I could watch over and over again. So I thought it would be fun to run down my top 5 favorite movies of 2023 so far, and my top 5 worst movies of 2023 so far. Coming up with this top 10 list was actually a pretty easy undertaking, but putting them in ranking order proved to be a much harder task. I went back and forth, several times before I finally decided upon a final ranking for these 10 movies. So, without further ado, let's get into this list, starting with my top 5 worst movies of 2023 so far. We'll start with the best of the worst at number 5, and then we'll work our way all the way up to the worst of the worst at number 1. Let's look at the movies that need to be burned with fire and never spoken of again. Coming in at number 5, the best of the worst, we have Chevalier. The actual historical figure Chevalier deserved a much better movie than what he got. His life was so rich and varied and dynamic, there was no dearth of material from which to draw for his life story. He was a fencer. He was a composer, he was a conductor, he became part of the royal family's entourage, he was a leader in the French Revolution, and he was black. He led an extraordinary life which should have been focused on. Instead, what we got was a movie-length soap opera about his doomed love affair with a white woman. It's the best of the worst because my hope is, after seeing this movie, someone will be inspired enough to look him up and read more about him and get to know the incredible man that was Chevalier de Saint-Georges. He deserves that. At number 4, we have Jesus Revolution. This is another historical drama that should have been a lot better than it was. Instead, it took absolutely no risk, glossed over a lot of important historical points, and ignored other important points altogether. One key point left out in this decidedly Christian movie is one of the main lead characters in the movie, Lonnie Frisbee, in real life was a gay man who died of AIDS in the early 90s. None of that is ever mentioned. Not only that, but no one in this movie is even remotely queer. It's as if we don't exist at all, which is really ironic considering one of the leaders of the Jesus movement of the late 60s, who is prominently featured in this film, was an out gay man. Much like Chevalier, because this is an historical film, my hope is people watching this movie will be inspired to look deeper into the Jesus hippie movement of the late 60s. And I hope on that quest for more information, they do a deep dive into Lonnie Frisbee's life. Again, he deserves that. Coming in at number 3, we have Knock at the Cabin. Now, from a technical standpoint, Knock at the Cabin is a good movie. It's shot really, really well. M. Night Shyamalan knows how to shoot a movie. And as I said in my in-depth review, David Bautista does some of his best acting work to date in this movie. But the premise of this movie is so cynical. It's so devoid of compassion and unconditional love. Two things I believe in my gut, the universe and God energy are all about. It actually made me angry about it. In this universe M. Night has created, life isn't even random. It's consciously cruel. And that conscious cruelness comes directly from the heavens above. In this movie, we are the universe's playthings. It's toys that it wouldn't care less about, but loves to terrorize, fuck with, and ultimately destroy, and then start all over again because it's fun. It's the most cynical movie I have seen all year long. Absolutely horrible movie. Burn it with fire. At number 2, we have Hypnotic. This was a really good idea turned into a really bad movie. I said in my in-depth review it would have made for an excellent series. The premise is just too big, in my opinion, for a 2-hour movie. And it's way too big for a 90-minute movie like this one. Ben Affleck continues to be a solid actor, and as an aside, he is still by far my favorite Batman of all time. But he should never get in front of the camera again for any movie he is not passionate about. He sleepwalked through this entire film, and it shows. He should spend his time behind the camera, directing movies like Air, which we'll get to in just a moment. This is a really bad movie. But as bad as it is, honey, it is absolutely nothing compared to the dumpster fire that is our worst movie of 2023 so far. What's that movie, you ask? Why, it's House Party. One of the first wide releases of the new year, way back in January. This movie was actually supposed to be a streaming movie for HBO Max. Rest in peace, HBO Max. Give it up for Max. David Zaslav has never saw a dollar sign he didn't love, so instead of releasing it straight to HBO Max, he threw it on movie screens where it died a horrible, but thankfully really quick death. So quick, in fact, that 2.5 weeks after it debuted, it was already on video on demand. There is absolutely nothing redeeming about this film. At all. It's not funny. At all. The premise is so wild and so far-fetched, it's ridiculous. The celebrity cameos, including a profoundly bizarre cameo from the original House Party stars, Kid and Play, could do nothing to save this film. This is an absolute garbage film that should have never made it to the big screen. It's on Max right now if you want to watch it, but I strongly advise you not to. Which brings us to our top 5 best movies of 2023 so far. The ranking for these movies was so hard to do, y'all. Honestly, there have been so many good movies this year so far, and I've been lucky enough to see most of them. I thought about expanding it out to a top 10 instead of a top 5, but then this video would be way too long. So instead of giving you a top 10 for the halfway point, I'm going to wait and give you a top 5, but with a rapid fire honorable mention section. Here we go. Honorable mentions. The Little Mermaid. The changes made for the live action version of this movie were the right changes to make. They made the movie better. Halle Bailey shone as Ariel, a mermaid little black and brown children can look up to and see themselves reflected back at them. Speaking of black and brown people, our next honorable mention goes to The Blackening. Spoiler alert! Unless something spectacular, and I do mean spectacular, comes along in the next 6 months, The Blackening will be in my top 10 list of best movies of 2023. It really will. It is a fresh and funny take on the horror genre seen through the prism of the Black experience. It's like a Jordan Peele movie, only with laughs. Next honorable mention, Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3. James Gunn said The Flash was the best superhero movie ever made, but I wonder, did he see his own movie? 'Cause it was a banger, and it almost made my top 5. But another superhero movie came along and blew every superhero movie made this year so far completely out of the water. That being said, Guardians of the Galaxy is a fantastic movie. If you haven't seen it yet, do yourself a favor and go. And my last honorable mention goes to the Super Mario Brothers movie. Just like Guardians, this one just missed the top 5. I know it has divided critics, but audiences have eaten this movie up. I didn't have high hopes going into this movie, but it didn't take long for me to be sucked in. Yes, the plot is paper thin. No, it won't be winning any awards come award season, although I can definitely see it nominated in the Best Animated Feature category. But it's still a rollicking fun time at the movies. Jack Black, of course, stole the entire show with his performance as Bowser. And if you weren't smiling from ear to ear, tapping your feet and singing along to Peaches, honey, something is wrong with you. And so here we are at the top 5 best movies of 2023 so far. Coming in at number 5 for the best of the best movies of 2023 so far is Indiana Jones and the Dial of Destiny. I know, this is a divisive choice. While audiences are eating this movie up, it currently has an audience score of 89% on Rotten Tomatoes. Critics are having somewhat of a harder time. The critic score, to be fair, is still a fresh but kind of middle of the road, 68%. And I get why critics are giving it a meh. For one, it leans way too hard into nostalgia moments. But it's because of those nostalgia moments is why I'm letting this one slide its way into the top 5 so far. It gave me all the feels. I would see how certain scenes were callbacks to the first 3 movies. And whenever those moments would come up, I'd be like, oh, I remember that. And I'd get all warm and fuzzy inside. Now, while critics would argue the current story suffers from nostalgia overload, I say the nostalgia is one of the things that actually saves this movie. This movie was made for the kids like myself who grew up on the first 3 movies. Yes, people who have never seen an Indiana Jones movie can still enjoy this movie, but for those of us who grew up with the originals, this movie just hits different. It gave me all the good feels, and that's why it's coming in at number 5. Coming in at number 4, Creed 3. That's right, Creed 3. This movie is phenomenal. Unlike the indie movies, I hadn't seen any of the Creed movies prior to this one, so I had no nostalgic feelings toward the franchise except for tangentially the Rocky movies. In fact, Sylvester Stallone is not even in this movie, and quite frankly, he wasn't missed at all. The movie didn't need him. But even without Rocky in it, I was able to go into this movie and appreciate it for what it was. A damn good movie. For his first time out as director, Michael B. Jordan knocks it out of the park. His influences and inspirations are right there on the screen, and that final fight between him and Jonathan Majors is one that will go down in history as one of the best boxing matches ever filmed. This movie is absolutely incredible. If you haven't seen it, find it on streaming. It's an amazing film. Number 3, are you there, God? It's me, Margaret. As I said in my in-depth review, I thought I knew what this movie was all about. I thought it was about a preteen girl and all of her friends waiting for their periods to arrive so they could finally become women. And to be fair, that was indeed part of the film, but it was about so much more than that. It was a coming-of-age story in so many different ways. I, as a cisgender man, went into this movie thinking, okay, I'm going to learn about periods and what it's like to experience one for the first time, etc., etc., etc. And I was really excited about that learning prospect because learning more about women makes me a better man. So how pleasantly surprised I was to watch this little girl come into her own. Not just physically, but mentally, emotionally, and spiritually as well. So many different themes were covered in this movie. So many important topics were touched upon. Wonderfully made, beautifully acted. Abby Ryder-Fortson has a career ahead of her. You felt connected to the main characters and you were rooting for them all to succeed, especially Little Miss Margaret. This one will be a contender come awards season. As will my number 2 pick, Air. At this point, Viola Davis is a lock for a Best Supporting Actress nod. And why wouldn't she be? She is amazing, of course, in everything she's in. And this movie is no exception. And the crazy thing is, this movie isn't even about her. She's just a supporting player, but she's easily the best part of an all-around phenomenal movie. Same with Jason Bateman. At this point, he too is easily a lock for a Best Supporting Actor nod. I think I said in my in-depth review of this movie that Jason has a monologue in this film that is so quietly powerful. And the moment I was watching it, I thought, there's his Oscar clip. Everyone in this film is wonderful. Ben Affleck, who directed this movie, allowed the actors in the movie to be the driving force behind the movie. This film doesn't have a lot of bells and whistles. There are no explosions or car chases. There are no capes. The only superhero in this film is Michael Jordan because, well, he just is. This movie is a character study, a talkie, if you will. But for as much of a talkie as this movie was, I was always engaged, never bored. And that's because Ben hired the best of the best actors to carry this movie. It's the first true Oscar bait movie of the year. It's streaming now on Amazon Prime. Do yourself a favor and go see it. And finally, here we are at the top of the list, the best movie of 2023 so far. The number 1 top of the top movie of 2023 so far is Spider-Man Across the Spider-Verse. An animated superhero movie at number 1, Steven? Absolutely. You know, I'm thinking back to the animation in the first Miles Morales-led Superman movie. Superman? The first Miles Morales-led Spider-Man movie way back in 2018. And I remember how great that movie was. How next level the animation in it was. So next level, in fact, it ended up winning the Best Animated Feature Oscar at that year's Academy Awards. And when I compare that movie to the animation in Across the Spider-Verse and realize in the 5 years since the first movie how the caliber of animation has advanced by light years since. You know, I can't help but be amazed. I can't help but stand. There were more than a few times when I was watching this movie that I was literally taken out of the story because I was so distracted, in a good way, by the animation I was witnessing on screen. I was oohing and ahhing and wowing out loud at what I was taking in. And animation aside, much like the first film, the story in this film is amazing. It's practically airtight. It grabs you by the bits and does not let go for almost 2.5 hours. You know, I often say about movies, the story always has to come first. You can have all the capes, explosions, and car chases you want, but if the story doesn't justify all that action, you might as well be watching a Michael Bay movie. No shade. This movie has more than enough story to more than justify all the amazing action in it. And quite frankly, unless Disney does something mind-blowing in the next 6 months, Elemental ain't it, honey. Sorry. Across the Spider-Verse will not only be nominated for this year's Best Animated Feature, but it will take that Oscar home. As well it should. It's by far the best movie of 2023 so far. And that's it, Butter Babies. My list of the top 5 best and worst movies of 2023 so far. So now I turn it over to you. Do you agree with this list? Would you have switched the order of some of the movies on my list? Are there movies that should be on either list but didn't make the cut? What's your top 5 best and worst? I know y'all have something to say about it all, and that's okay because I want to hear it all. Let's keep the conversation going in the comments section down below. Thank you so much for watching, commenting, and subscribing, Butter Babies. And I will see you in the next one.